No, you don't. Now, if you had anything to talk about or converse with the general public, what would it be about?
It would be about the need for people to put for people to stop using more resources, than they're giving
And
to the world, to the planet.
in what aspect?
Well, consumerism is one thing, but that's too shallow. It's people have this idea that we as a species have to grow instead of live with the other species on the planet and caretake the planet. Okay.
What
And
resource?
we have that kind of responsibility to the planet, but people, I'm not sure, recognize that.
What resources are you thinking of? Basically,
Well, I don't want
is
to
it
get
all
into specifics
resources?
because I'm not a scholar.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about resources of, we eat way too much meat, for instance. The methane created by all the cows we've got is one of the greatest contributors to global warming. So just to eat, we could change our way of using resources. And certainly you saw that thing on 60 Minutes last night about rare earths.
Right.
Right? Those are resources. If we use them up in the short-term quest for technology and development and growth, when we really need them, they won't be there for us. We are using resources that are finite, that are limited.
Like we don't have another planet.
And we can't continue to do that and survive as a species. And this is what I'm always thinking about, is that our species' very survival depends not just on technological development, but on our spiritual evolution, because we have not evolved to the point that our technology is at. It passed us up 20, 30 years ago. And that's why you have things like, in my opinion, non-scholarly opinion, that's why you have things like Asperger's. That's why you have things like autism.
How does that affect those things?
My perception of it is, and I'm going to stress everything with it's just my opinion, but my perception of it is that, particularly with regard to autism and Asperger's, children are being born into a very different environment than they were born into 30 or 40 or even especially 50 or 60 years ago. We tend to think of ourselves as being people in our surroundings, but we're not people in one surrounding. We each have our own environment. Even in this room, there's two people. There's me. I'm looking at a cute blonde with a little cute dog and a growling cat behind her. And you're just looking at some old Jewish guy in front of a weird piece of art in an Amish fireplace. So we have two completely different environments that we're taking care of. And the environment you're born into is really important. When you and I watched I Love Lucy in the 1950s, she was doing slapsticky things, but the camera stayed on her for maybe 5 or 10 minutes while she and Ricky would talk, and usually it was just the two of them. And now, kids are born into a world where there's bam, 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 in terms of videos, in terms of video games, in terms of the fact that when we were watching our 3 channels of TV 50 years ago, there were 2 commercials in 2 minutes. And now it can be anywhere from 10 to 30 or even 40 commercials in a 2-minute space of time, because it's just such quick cuts. So everything in technology and our environment, which I was talking about before, is moving much faster at what's called nanoseconds. There's a wonderful book called Time Wars. We evolved to work in seconds. Computers and technology, and this is why that kind of affects your TBI too. Computers and technology, you can edit it out. Yeah, you got an editor. Anyway, I'm just saying, computers and technology are hitting us with so much. Your average child right now experiences more sensory input, light, movement, sound, everything else. In a day, he or she, like Juju or Tyler, probably experience 25 times what you and I experienced at their age. But genetically, they're not that far evolved. It's only 30 years. Everybody knows evolution takes place over thousands of years. You've got to evolve these things. And I personally believe that both autism and ADHD are evolution towards dealing with this new digital world that we're entering. But if they're evolution, then you've got to cultivate them and see where the dangers are and see where the health is. Don't automatically assume it's a bad thing just because your kid is unique and not appropriate, and badly behaved. Maybe because he sees a lot of badly behaving adults. My gosh, if I'm a kid and I can turn on the television set and I can watch a United States congressman threaten to throw a TV reporter off the balcony of the Capitol, don't try and tell me what's appropriate when grown-ups in my world at the highest level are doing those kinds of things.
Right.
So that's why I hate the word appropriate so much, because we have not created a very appropriate world for our children.
It came out this week that electronics is an addiction.
No, that's just because somebody wants to make money off of addiction.
You don't think that it could be an addiction?
Anything. Yeah, here's what I believe. And it was said by, I think, and again, I'm not a scholar, but if I'm correct, I believe it was the Greek philosopher Socrates. Everything in moderation. Of course, if you're doing too much of anything, it becomes an addiction. There's also things like compulsions we have, which are biological urges. It could be the urge to eat. It could be the urge.
I think that's what they were saying, that it's more biological with children, that they could get addicted easier to electronics.
But they're going to use that to try and justify an addiction program.
Oh.
And the fact is that I agree with Candace Pert. This is a chicken or egg situation. Is the physiological change causing the addiction, or is the addiction to the video games causing the physiological change? Chicken or egg, which is coming first, you see? And the addiction people are more than happy to say that it's the thing that you're addicted to and it's biological, because then they can make pills and put you in really expensive treatment to cure your addiction, which doesn't really get cured in the vast majority of the cases, whether they're impoverished treatment centers or Hazelton type treatment centers. There's a lot of recidivism, there's a lot of repeat. And the newest research right now is saying that what really counts to cure people of addiction is community, is to be with people, families and friends, and have a purpose in life. There's a lot of new research being done on little white mice that are indicating that that's much more a cure for addiction, makes somebody feel purposeful in this world. And that's what I love about Adler, because Adler talked about social interest, and he said you don't find, my interpretation, for all you classical Adlerians out there, they always look really sour and everything, but I love Adler. But the Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which was the notion of social interest, to my mind means we find our mental health in our relationship to the world around us, to the environment, to the society, the community. A person wins the Academy Award, the World Series, who do they praise besides Jesus? Some of them. They say, it's for my wife, it's for my mom and dad, it's all of that. That's where people find their mental health, in the connection and the communication with each other. And so if you could get that, people wouldn't be addicted. Or maybe they'd be addicted to love, You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But when they're too fast to label things an addiction that aren't an addiction. It's the normal process of living. So yeah, there's a terrible addiction, but I'm operating, if I was dealing with a kid who was playing too much video games, I would look at the psychological aspect long before I looked at the physical. And the addictions people would rather have me look at the physical things that are making him do that. And I'm saying, no, that's creating the change in him and the world he looks at. Even when he puts the video game down, that's the thing. Even when he puts the video game down, he's being told, especially if he's in school, he's being taught. George W. Bush created a couple of laws that were exactly the opposite, named exactly the opposite for what they actually did. One of them was called No Child Left Behind, which should have been called Every Child Left Behind. Okay, and the other one that I love is the Blue Skies Initiative, which took away all the regulation on polluters. You know, what an evil dude. It's probably Dick Cheney. Anyway, I
just read that and I thought, well, we're talking about how the changes have happened in the last 26, 30 years, where when we were growing up, we could only handle 3 channels on the TV. Now these games are
well, that's what I'm saying. There's just way too much input.
Yeah.
Way too much input. You know what that feels like.
Yes.
Okay. I'm saying everybody is subject to that these days, especially little kids.
Do you think?
And then, but here's the thing about video games. I'll give you the answer. Again, my opinion. I don't have any evidence. The reason why they are so addicted to the video games, and I don't think this is anything biological, it's because the world is such a confusing, nonsensical place to them. Video games give you control over the world that you're in, and that's why they like the video games. Do you ever try and pull an autistic kid, or you know, an Asperger's kid, or you know, off a video game? It's the worst thing you can do, because you're saying, okay, now we're going to go from the world that you're in control to the world where you're totally out of control and you can't figure out what the hell is going on because people are so strange.
Do you think that it's possible for the world to realize the devastation that all of this pollution and raping of the earth, do you think that there's a possibility that there'll come a time of enlightenment with that? That they will
I think people are already realizing it. There is a growing consciousness of that fact. The problem is that we live in a world where 1% of the people own 90% of the stuff. You see what I'm saying? So no matter how great the consciousness is, how many millions and maybe even billions of people understand that we're in this predicament, there's a few hundred people, and I'm not talking conspiracies there. I'm just talking about the people who own everything.
Right.
Who literally own everything. So what there needs to be is a revolution. But my contention is that this needs to be a nonviolent revolution. I'm a Buddhist, and I'm with Gandhi, and it has to be a nonviolent revolution. But there's got to be a way to restructure the economy. One great way to start, and I'm hoping Bernie Sanders says it. The last time we had prosperity in this country, and it was a good model for prosperity in every country in the world, was back around the 1950s. And I'm not going to term it communism or socialism or capitalism, but in the 1950s, under Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower, tax rates for the richest people were 75, 80, sometimes 90% of their income. And we had this amazing period of prosperity where we built the railroads and we built the highway system and we won World War II. And all that was coming because the richest people were taxed at really high amounts. And that was fine, because how much money do you need to live? And there's not a billionaire in the world that works 1,000,000 times harder than the people that work for him. And yet 1 billion is 1,000,000 times 1,000. So the fact is, oh, he's fighting with the cat. So that was a time of great prosperity. The great damage came with Ronald Reagan. Rates had already been cut, but with Ronald Reagan, all the rich people only got taxed at less than 40% or 30%, and it's been going downhill for 30 years. So more than half of the money that used to go to run the country, bad or good, yeah, government agencies are messed up. We all know they're run by bureaucrats, and some are good and some are bad. But it's not a waste of money, because those government agencies are working for the common good of all Americans. But what's happened is now all that money has come out, especially out of social services. And it shouldn't even be. I mean, that money should be providing health care. It shouldn't be a private corporation kind of thing. Wait, turn it off, because you're getting really distracted, and that's distracting me.
I'm sorry. No, I'm with you. It's just the kids in the yard.
Well, it's a neighborhood. We live in a neighborhood.
You want to talk through the growls of the dogs?
I don't care. I'm more reacting to your arms.
I'm sorry.
So I forgot the question.
I was wondering about the timing of people's enlightenment, of all the raping of the
consciousness is
resources.
changing now, and I think a revolution has to happen, and I would like a peaceful revolution, although in any revolution people get hurt.
Right.
I would like to see the rich people get hurt because they've been hurting a lot of people for a long time. I'd really like to see karma come around. I'd really like to see them. You know, I think people like that guy last night and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, they get it. Allow them to get it. But most of the ones, those ones who even make those people look poor, those ones who are at the top 1%,
Right,
who owns
right.
like the 80 or 90%, and they're there thinking that that's God's gift to them. That if they weren't so righteous, they wouldn't have all this wealth and all this power. So they're operating from pure conviction that they've got the right way of doing things. Otherwise, they wouldn't have all this power and all this money. The reality is, it's power and money that's created over lifetimes, but they don't see that because I'm a Buddhist, and they generally think in terms of heaven and hell, and accumulate as much material stuff as you can in a single lifetime, which is just a silly way of
Self-entitlement.
living. Well, but they believe it. They
Yes.
believe they're good. They believe they're the best. They believe they're chosen. That's why the Jews got in so much trouble, speaking as a Jew, and that's why the Japanese got in so much trouble too, because Japanese people believed they were chosen by the sun goddess. You know.
But you do see it's starting now.
I see the consciousness starting now, but it was starting in the 60s
Do you
too.
think-
It was starting in the 60s too. But too many people co-opt themselves because you had to live. You had to make a living. You had, you know, and now our kids don't even know how they're going to make a living because the options have become so limited. You know, and they're the ones who are going to be at the forefront of the revolution. And I hope a lot of it's just on in cyberspace. Do you have any idea the chaos that would be created if major computer systems were disrupted? You know,
I think I can figure that out.
there's a great movie, it's everybody knows, it's called Fight Club, and the whole notion of Fight Club is about they figure out a way to blow up all the credit agencies, and they do. But just things like that, all this stuff that's so easily hackable, this whole thing could fall apart tomorrow with the right kind of coordinated cyberspace attack. And that's what has to happen. It's not against a country. It has to happen against the entitled, the wealthy. Take down their systems, and then it'll really be hard, because then people will be, like a town like this, we probably have to figure out what are we going to barter, because the economic system can fall apart in a heartbeat. You know what I'm saying? I mean, does it make sense what I'm saying? So I think that's going to happen. You've always heard me preach not doom and gloom, but I've always said there had to be a culling of the herd.
Right.
Where the earth is full, we can't have any more babies, and I know that really offends everybody who loves babies and thinks children are really important.
Yeah, they
and
are.
all the rest of it. Yeah, they really are. But right now, if they're so damn important, why don't we make a better world for the ones that are already here instead of just
Exactly.
making more? There's no reason with birth control why you need to make more babies. And let people who really want a baby, yeah, fine. But this thing. But the great thing is too, where the best birth control is where the women are the most educated. That's where you get the population to come down. And that's why I can't figure out even what makes a woman a Republican. I cannot for the life of me figure out why any woman votes Republican, but it may be that their husband beats them into it, either psychologically or physically. I mean, I don't understand how women can't look at Republicans and go, my God, they're out to take away every right I've got. Or workers.
Right.
They're going to take away every labor union, which before Ronald Reagan, this all started with Reagan, and it was all part of a plan, a really big plan, to take over the United States for at least 100 years, if not longer. But part of it really involved doing away with unions. 38% of the American workforce was in unions. Were unions bad? Yeah, Jimmy Hoffa was a bad guy, and there were corrupt union officials. But by and large, unions gave workers the power to get what they needed from the wealthy people to be able to buy their stuff. 38%, I believe it was. Again, I'm not a scholar. That's before Reagan. You know what the union membership rate is in the United States today?
No.
Seth Walker is real dangerous on that one. But anyway, I don't even remember what the question was. Are people
It's
gaining
okay.
the consciousness?
Yes,
And yeah, I
yeah.
think they are. But they're helpless. They're helpless.
They
It's
need to-
either there has to be a revolution. There's one other way. There's one other way. Everything can change, and it's the one I pray for. Aliens.
All right, Mr. Roman. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss on this clip?
Yeah, you're asking the question. No, this is fine.
All right.
I'll be interested to see if you get 20 usable seconds out of that.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.